what's up guys, Maidenslave here, and today we're going to be talking about Screaming for Vengeance, Judas Priest's 8th album. Screaming for Vengeance is pretty damn legendary at this point. It's one of their kind of big albums in their catalog that a lot of people talk about, a lot of people praise, a lot of people were influenced by it, and I really feel like Judas Priest at this point completely just engulfed this new wave of British heavy metal. Everybody kind of had a good idea of the direction that metal was going to be going in, kind of a bit more of an epic thing, very melodic. They kind of went down that path. And the musicianship on this album is definitely a lot better than Point of Entry. It sounds like they spent a lot more time on the music pretty much and on the ideas. One of the worst things about the previous album was the artwork. Not only was it confusing because there was 2 pieces of artwork, but both of them were pretty damn dull. So they probably the smartest thing that they did on around this time was they got a really good artist by the name of Doug Johnson, and he did pretty much the next 3 pieces of artwork. He has a very distinct style of artwork with Judas Priest, and the first one that he would do would be the Screaming for Vengeance artwork, which is definitely one of their best pieces of artwork by far. It has the crazy ass Hellion on the front with the fucking missiles and shit. It's very, very metal. It's very cool. Another thing that I liked about it a lot is he actually made sense out of their logo, the way that it curves, very similar to Stained Class. The album kind of had curving lines. Well, he kind of brought it back and he made it 3D, which was definitely very, very cool. The artwork gets an A+ in my book. I've always liked it, always will like it, and it makes up for a pretty good poster and shirt. Good merchandising, like Iron Maiden has been around at this point for a couple of years already, and people started getting a hint that merchandising was a very big part of being in a band. As far as the production goes, it pretty much stays the same way it was in the past 2 albums. They kind of found their sound that they would have for the 80s. It wouldn't change radically again until Turbo, which is in a couple albums. But as far as the actual sound, it is very similar to the past 2 albums. Except I did notice that it does sound a little bit thinner than the past 2 albums. It just really seems like the lower end, the drums and the bass kind of got, ripped out of the final master. It really seems like they were very low, and pretty much it gives this album kind of a lack of heaviness. That said, it is still a pretty, damn good album. So the first song is called The Hellion, and this is an intro that would become extremely famous among Judas Priest fans and extremely famous among, just the heavy metal community. Right off the bat, it is extremely melodic. We are definitely now getting a much more melodic band out of Judas Priest at this point, and it starts right off the bat with the intro, The Hellion. Really, really great intro. Very short and sweet, basically. It goes perfectly into Electric Eye, which is another hit from Judas Priest. It is a great song, that's for sure. As far as the actual music itself goes, it doesn't do anything spectacular. Rob Halford, his voice is kind of laid back for most of the song. It doesn't get higher until later. The solos are great. It sounds great. Definitely one of the highlights on the album for sure. Next song is called Riding on the Wind, and this has a really, really cool drum kind of solo intro type thing. And it sounds to me like they tweaked the sound to make it kind of sound, I don't know, like windy. Like it seems like they just made it maybe a little bit higher, maybe a pitch higher or something like that. It sounds like they tweaked it a little bit and it made it sound really good. And Riding on the Wind is definitely a great song, a much more upbeat song. Probably, the most upbeat song at this point for sure. It kind of gets away from this this, like I was saying, this Judas Priest kind of just driving rock. It picks up the tempo, and it feels like it gets them kind of out of their comfort zone. And for that I really like it. The vocals are great. The guitar melodies are great. The solos are amazing. You got that twin attack just happening like that and like that. Next song is called Bloodstone, and this is a pretty good song. But really, there's kind of nothing spectacular that's there. The chorus is probably the absolute highlight of the song. It is extremely, extremely catchy. Rob's performance is really, really good. His voice is sounding better than ever at this point. But other than that, there's really nothing much there. But you know, it's not like they drag it out. It's actually a pretty short song, so it's actually done right in my opinion. Sure, it's not the strongest song ever, but it's not insulting anybody, that's for sure. Yeah, the next song is called Take These Chains. This is a bit of a slower song. The vocals are absolutely amazing, once again. However, I do have one minor critique about it. It sounds very of the times, especially the chorus sounds very 80s, and for that it kind of ages it. You know, like I said, yeah, you could say that Judas Priest kind of helped develop the sound of the 80s, but you know, there's definitely parts on their albums during the 80s that they kind of get caught up in it a little bit too much, and you have a song like Take These Chains that will definitely not age as well as something like Riding on the Wind. That said, though, it is actually one of the better moments on the album. And a little thing to note, it wasn't actually written by anybody in the band. It was written by a guy named Robert Halligan Jr., who, as far as I know, was friends with Rob Halford. And it definitely, once again, you know, they picked kind of a good song to put on an album. It definitely didn't sound any different than their writing at this point, you know, in the album, in the era, and all that good shit. Next song is called Pain and Pleasure. And to be honest for you, for most of this song, I was a little bit more in pain rather than pleasure. There was really nothing there. It seemed very uncreative. It kind of just seemed like a filler. It kind of went back to the point of entry time. There was nothing that really stuck out in my mind. It wasn't very memorable. Next song is the title track, Screaming for Vengeance, and this is by far the best song on the album in my opinion. It sounds way different than all the other songs on this album, and it sounds way different than all the other songs that they were doing in the 80s. Very, very, very fast, upbeat, very heavy for Judas Priest. Very good leads, very good melodic lines, a very good musical interlude. It sounded really, really, really good for Judas Priest at this time. The musicianship was way, way up there. Next song is called You've Got Another Thing Coming, and this is definitely very similar to Heading Out to the Highway or something off of Breaking the Law or something like that. It is that good old classic Judas Priest kind of groove, and this is actually one of their grooves, one of their songs that they use their classic formula on that actually ends up being pretty damn good. I really like the way that the chorus kind of envelops. You know, I really like the melodic lines. I like the solos. A lot of that, the performance of this band actually saves this song from being kind of forgettable. So it's a great song. The next song is called Fever, and this song has an absolutely beautiful guitar intro, undistorted, very clear guitar. It just sounds very beautiful. The singing is amazing. You know, it crescendos up to the chorus, right? But once it reaches the chorus and it kind of goes through that motion, you've heard the entire song. You know, kind of after that point, it just kind of fizzles out into nothing. And Judas Priest actually did do this a lot back in the day, you know, making it a pretty weak song, and it's actually it was actually quite a disappointment in my eyes because it started out so promising. The last song is called Devil's Child, and this is a good song. You know, I really don't have any major complaints. It's not like, you know, it's not spectacular like Screaming for Vengeance, right, or any of the other really great songs that they did, but, you know, it's not the worst song in the world. I think, once again, very similar to You Got Another Thing Coming. Kind of the performance, the enthusiasm of the band kind of saved it. Rob Halford's vocals are incredible at this point. Great song, great leads everywhere. Yeah, so, Screaming for Vengeance definitely is the best album that Judas Priest put out since probably Stained Class, in my opinion. It seemed to be the most consistent. It kind of seemed like they actually were able to get out of their comfort zone for the most part. You know, that said, this whole album isn't amazing, and very similar to something like British Steel. They start out with 3 amazing songs that get you extremely hyped, and then it just kind of goes nowhere. There's a lot of fillers on this album that are definitely not as strong as some of the great songs on this album, and I really, you know, I don't know what it was about Priest. You know, I know that back in the day, when you bought an album or vinyl, pretty much, you really loved it. It was like, you know, you even liked the fillers. I really feel like bands can't really get away with putting fillers on their albums anymore because music is so much more accessible than it was back in 1982. You don't go out and spend a lot of money on a vinyl and then have this vinyl and fall in love with it. There's so many different options for us now that honestly, I don't have time for a lot of the songs on this album. Sure, some of them are really, really, really great, but about half, and that's being nice, are fillers, pretty much. But I will agree that Screaming for Vengeance did a lot for metal. It is definitely one of the most influential metal albums to come out of the 1980s and to kind of come out of this era and this genre. A lot of people were influenced by it, but to be honest with you, I really feel like these people are more influenced by the band and what they were doing and kind of the hype around the album, the kind of the delivery, the message, more than the actual album itself. When you take this actual album, it isn't the best album in the world. So I'm going to give Screaming for Vengeance by Judas Priest a 7.5 out of 10. Later, guys.